Learning English isn't just about vocabulary and grammar. It's about understanding how locals think so you can really make connections. Why do Brits sound polite but they actually mean no? Why is the humour so indirect? And why does small talk matter so much? In the UK Culture course, I break down British life from the inside. Language, behaviour, history, class, humour, and everyday social rules the native speakers never explain. This course is for learners who already know a bit of English but want to understand the culture behind it. Learn this and your conversations will start to feel more natural and warmer. If Britain has ever felt confusing, distant, or hard to read, this course will change that. Join us at suziewoo.com/culture. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Woo Pod. I am your host, Susie. I live in Brighton and I'm here with my co-host,
Rick Ross. Hello everyone.
So it's good to be back. We've had another week. What have you been up to, Rick?
It's been a very musical week this week. I've been listening to lots of Brazilian music, which I'm really enjoying. So I have a friend at work who's from Brazil. He's from Sao Paulo, and he keeps sending me these Brazilian albums from the 1970s, and I'm just absolutely loving it because I like old music anyway. So this is kind of old music, but music from a different country, and I'm just absolutely loving it. It's so good.
Oh, wow. You're going to have to send me that. That sounds interesting.
I will, yeah. It's all basically one artist. He's called George Ben, Jorge, George, and Ben is just Ben. He's really great. Some of his 70s stuff is amazing. So I will. We could put it in the show notes maybe or something like that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. Yeah, I've also been getting into different types of music. I think if our neighbours can hear the music that we play, they're going to be intrigued because it will be Bollywood one day, followed by Justin Bieber, followed by classical.
Oh wow, quite a mix there. Bollywood at least I've listened to a little bit of, not so much other kinds of Indian music, but Bollywood's great because there's really strong melodies. The singers are really good, like genuinely really, really good singers. Melodies that you can you can catch really quickly and they just go round and round in your head. Really fun to dance to. And there's like so many different kinds of instruments. So there's just loads going on at once and the songs change quite a lot through the song. It's not just like one thing in the song, they change loads. And it's just quite theatrical. It can be a bit sort of, I don't know, yeah, it's just very energetic. So yeah, I'm a big fan as well. I got into it last year, mostly. And yeah, it's just so much fun. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Bollywood all the way.
Are you also with me on Justin Bieber?
No, I hate Justin Bieber. I'm sorry. No, I don't mind like a pop song or whatever, but I guess it's because when he became famous, it was at a time when I was listening to like completely different stuff. So I just was not in the mood for any of his stuff, and I've just never been able to change that perception in my head. But no, I really don't like Bieber. But
I think it's because we try to be cool in the UK. It's like he's so mainstream that it's like, ugh, I'm more original than that.
Yeah, I think there's a big trend of like music snobbiness in the UK, definitely.
Another thing that I've been up to is eating a lot of boiled eggs and soldiers. And so to cook that perfectly is actually quite difficult. And I've nailed the timing. It's 10 minutes in the pan from cold water to boiling. And then you have to take it out immediately. If you leave it a minute longer, it's going to be hard boiled and you waste your time. Yeah, the soldiers is just a piece of toast, butter, Marmite, cut into long strips, and then you dunk the strips of toast into the runny egg. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. When was the last time you had that? Because it's such a classic British thing, isn't it?
Very British thing. It's about having a nice sort of egg cup to put the egg in. When you were a kid, maybe you had like fun egg cups that were very colourful, or maybe they were like cartoon characters or something. So egg cups were a big thing when we were younger. You have to be careful in like whacking the top off so you don't like get loads of shell everywhere. The egg is then removed and then you can dip the soldiers in. They're called soldiers because you cut them into strips, so they're like sort of almost like soldiers standing up like this. The last time I loved it as well when I was a kid. And then you put a bit of salt on top of the egg, so it's all lovely and salty.
Maybe the problem is people struggle to cook them perfectly because it is actually quite hard to get the timing right.
It's very difficult. I think people just can't be bothered anymore. I think sadly, a lot of British food is quite labour intensive, or like, I don't know, it's a bit tricky in that way. So I think a lot of people just can't be bothered to cook it anymore, like roasts and things like that. But I think a lot of people don't bother anymore.
Another thing that I've been into recently is going to a carvery.
I think you're turning into me because I'm the one with all the boring stories, and now you're talking about eating eggs and going to carveries. So you should also explain. Okay, what's a carvery?
I think it's funny because it's such a bog standard, basic, like cheap restaurant, and they do roasts, but it's sort of like all you can eat meat and different types of vegetables and stuff. It's not like the best quality food, but I just love that it's a roast and you can eat so much.
I think it feels like a very 30s activity. Like we're not partying anymore, we're not doing anything interesting anymore. We're going to carveries on the weekend. But no, carveries they are a British institution. They are really good. But they're basically for people who, if you can't be bothered to make a roast, you just turn up to the carvery and they just carve the meat for you. And then usually it's some of them are all you can eat, so you don't even get a set amount. You get whatever you want and you just go and go and go. Are you go is this a now can I ask, it's free advertising for them, but is this a Toby Carvery that you're going to? That's a brand of carvery chain.
Yeah. I think the other reason it's funny is because it's just really not posh or fancy, is it? Yeah, when you can't be bothered or whatever, you just want a cheap meal.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely not that. You wouldn't take someone there on a date or anything like that. Yeah, it's a very British thing to do.
But on the topic of dating, as you just mentioned, you wouldn't go on a date there. We thought we'd answer some listener questions related to dating today. Are there any things to be aware of when dating someone from the UK? So probably quite a lot of things here.
Okay, well, I think to start off with, so we have a mutual friend who is from China, and she's just started to date a British guy. And as soon as she told me that she's starting to date a British guy, I immediately got really worried. I just think that we're just so much more relaxed with our approach to dating. We don't take it as seriously. There's situationships which we'll get into and lots of other things. I think we're very different dating styles around the world, and I just worried that she would go in with all these expectations and she'd be very disappointed.
Yeah. Can you explain what a situationship is?
So that's basically where you're basically boyfriend and girlfriend, but you haven't actually verbally made that commitment with each other. So you're acting as if you're boyfriend and girlfriend, doing all the things that boyfriends and girlfriends do, but there's none of the actual genuine commitment. And it means that either one person can just pull out of it at any second. So it's like having all the benefits of a real relationship, but with none of the commitment or so what happens is one person really wants to be in the relationship. The other person wants the benefits of the relationship but doesn't really want to commit. So they just keep a situationship going. They're in this grey area of, are we going out? Are we not quite going out? And they string the other person along who really wants the relationship, but they never get to that stage. And they do this for maybe a few months, maybe even a year, maybe even after a year. And then the person who doesn't want the relationship goes, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. And they just
I guess they're basically waiting for something better to come along, aren't they? They're sort of waiting for someone who they like more, maybe, to come along. So that's why they don't want to make that commitment.
I think so, yeah. Just a lot of especially amongst our generation, I think. There's just a lot of people who have been sort of burned from previous relationships, and a lot of people who they're always looking for the better thing to come along. They don't want to commit. They feel trapped very easily. It's all about maximizing freedom in a way that even our parents' generation didn't do. You know, you were with someone, you liked them, you committed to them. That was kind of it, really. Eventually, you get married and maybe have children. But I think in our generation, it just seems to be about we just can't accept the idea of your freedom being restricted in any way. I think that's what it is. Yeah, this is a big problem.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of it's about witnessing unhappy marriages when you were little? So the relationship between your parents, if that wasn't good, that makes people have a
Yes.
negative perception of the whole relationship thing, marriage, whatever.
I think so, yeah. A lot of people in the UK are the children of divorced couples. So I think that, yeah, they do look at that and they sort of think, oh, I don't want to get into that. Otherwise, I'll be trapped and I'll be really unhappy and I'll get what my parents got. But also, I think I wonder if it's also to do with, I mean, dating apps don't help, and we'll get onto that a little bit later. Just how much choice we have now, whereas back in the day, you only had a set number of people in your area who you could feasibly date, so you had to make a decision. I think now we're a bit spoiled for choice now. Yeah, I think there's just something else in our generation about just we just can't accept that we're not going to have it all in a way. We can't deal with that for some reason. I don't know why.
Greed, isn't it? You're wanting things to be absolutely perfect, whereas what you actually tend to find is that everyone has flaws in various different ways. Pick your challenge, I suppose. But yeah, coming back to our friend who's from China who's dating a British guy, I think it's very heartbreaking to see people go in to dating with a real naivety about, oh, he wants to go on a date with me. That must mean he wants to be my boyfriend. And then before you know it, you've slept together and he's gone off and he's lost interest, which is very common in the UK. And I think that can be really damaging for a lot of women.
I think as well, combined with this is what we were mentioning earlier about sometimes there's a perception that, oh, because I'm dating a British person, they have this sort of, especially if it's a guy, they're going to be this perfect gentleman, they're going to be really nice, they're going to be really polite and sweet and all the rest of it. But that's largely just a stereotype from films and TV. It's not a real phenomenon. It's not a real thing. Certainly not anymore, no. So it's going in with really high expectations and then coming into contact with the reality, which is people not taking dating and relationships and sex very seriously, and then it not working out and people getting hurt. So that's why when our friend told me that she was going to date a British guy, I immediately started panicking and worrying.
So that's how bad the stereotype that you have is about British guys. Are you being a British guy yourself?
Yeah, it's sad to admit that, but it's just how it is, really. So yeah, no, you can't hide away from it. That's just I think we're making it out. I think we're making out like sort of British guys are terrible. They're not terrible. It's just that you need to go in with the right expectations, I think.
There's a chance that even though he seems lovely, really nice, saying all the right things, being really sweet, you don't know his intentions. And I think you have to be really cautious and almost suspicious of everyone you meet. I think it's probably safer that way. Was it the contraceptive pill came in what, the 70s, 80s, 60s? Everything must have just changed since then. And it's been we're becoming progressively more, I guess, careless about sex. And I think there was this period of sexual freedom and that's really liberating for women. We can have sex and not get pregnant, which is cool, obviously, like to enjoy sex and not have the risk of having a baby with that person. But I just think there's something where there's emotions that come into play and that's really not talked about. And it's almost sort of shameful if you get attached to someone from having sex, which is such an intimate thing.
Yeah, you hear about it in songs and stuff, people talking about like catching feelings as if it's like a sort of surprising event. Whereas that's the point of the whole thing, is when you get closer and closer with someone. And if you're intimate with someone, then yeah, naturally you're going to bond on an emotional level. But yeah, we seem to think that we can completely separate physical intimacy with like emotional bonding. But obviously that's just not how humans work. And I think this is where a lot of the confusion comes in and a lot of the hurt feelings come in. I think it's about being very clear about what you want and not compromising on that. Not just going along with what the other person wants just for the sake of it. Just saying, look, I'm only prepared to go this far. I need you to commit to X, Y, and Z. I want this and this from the relationship. And if you aren't prepared to give me that, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, it's the whole sort of knowing your worth thing, isn't it? Oh, I had a friend recently that a while ago, she liked this guy and they, flirting, whatever, slept together. And then he, I guess, sort of lost interest and she was really heartbroken by it. And she came to me and was like, he's got back in touch. I think he's actually interested this time. He's saying like he loves me and stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, you know how he hurt you last time. So maybe just like take it slow. She's like, no, I think this is for sure now. You can say you told me so if it goes wrong. So, okay. A few weeks later, you can say you told me so. So he'd done the exact same thing again. And you just think, what is the reason for allowing that to happen? And I think it's this ideal of he wants me, therefore he like wants me as a person, he wants to commit to me, but forgetting that he can just want you for a one night thing.
Well, I think part of it as well is, a lot of people just want to find the right person and settle down, and then they don't have to worry about sort of dating and all of the chaos and worry that comes with that. So I think when you're really, really desperate to get to that end stage, so that leads to a bit of self-deception, ultimately, because you just really, really want it to be true. You really want it to work out. You really want it to be the one, and then that's it. It's over. I can forget about dating and everything. So you sort of end up overlooking the obvious red flags, as they call them, the obvious signs that this is not going to work out for you, and you get carried away and then you end up getting hurt. So dating's a bit of a minefield in the UK, and to be honest, kind of in other places as well, really. I think this isn't just a UK problem. Don't compromise on what you want from the relationship.
Yeah. And but I think what's such a shame about that is that then when people have a few bad experiences, they're actually like quite quick to be like, oh, you're just doing the same thing. So maybe someone is slow to reply, and then you jump the gun and think, oh, he's not interested. Okay, screw him. But maybe he was just a slower reply person. Because then maybe two people who would actually be suited have both had bad experiences in the past, and they don't allow the relationship to progress and like just trust the other person. So it's a hard balance, really hard.
Yeah, there's a dating fatigue, and then you get some people who just kind of give up on it altogether for like longer periods of time because they're just so sick of the whole thing. And I'm not sure if that was so much the case, 20, 30, 40 years ago as much. I'm not sure that it was this crazy, this chaotic, that it's actually making people just give up on the whole thing. But connected to that, it's quite interesting because we're talking about how crazy dating is amongst our generation. But if you look at the next generation, Gen Z, fewer and fewer of them are dating at all. They're not bothering to date anymore. And they're having less sex, sort of doing less of everything, really. Not dating people, not meeting people, having fewer friendships, not just romantic relationships. So we've hit this strange point where maybe peak crazy dating was with us, and now the next generation just are doing something completely different, which seems strange to think, but yeah, that apparently is the point we've got to.
I always wonder if that's something to do with COVID, that elongated period of time of no social contact at a time when you really need it when you're young. I wonder if it's sort of affected the way people think and feel about socializing and being close to others.
You do wonder, because it was such a strange period of time. Yeah, it's really hard to get your head around. I just thought things were going to get crazier and crazier with each generation. That's what I thought, but there's been this almost, people are getting more conservative now. So they're happy just to, which is strange, but...
I think also like more education, people consuming more content online about how to avoid being hurt. I guess it's that whole question of like, are humans supposed to be monogamous? My personal opinion is that maybe the most likely natural situation is to be with one person for a while, maybe a couple years, because then you sort of have the baby and then look after the baby and then maybe you move on after that. I don't know. But I mean, there are some animals that do that.
Yes. Yeah, we've got to the stage in the culture where it's the reverse is the norm, where you're expected to stay with someone at least for a long time. Obviously, divorce isn't really stigmatized that much anymore. So it is okay to kind of have second or third relationships. But yeah, there still seems to be an expectation of like very long stints of time where you're with someone and making it work and everything. But I don't want to sort of confuse the listeners and suggest that if you're dating a British person, they're going to expect open relationships or anything like that. I think this is very much a new phenomenon in Britain. Yes, most people, even though they might be a bit afraid of commitment or a bit difficult to get them to commit, I think the expectation is still just a normal relationship. Two people, they're exclusive.
Yeah, and usually they would disclose and say, I'm in an open relationship or I'm looking for an open relationship. If they're good people, they should tell you that, definitely.
Which actually leads us neatly on to another listener question, which is, what do we count as cheating?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what I think is cheating. That's kind of an interesting question because I sort of assume that if the other person was even just like flirting a lot or hanging out with someone who's not their main partner, that is treading on risky territory and is likely to make the other person uncomfortable. I think it's just an emotional intelligence type thing. Like, is this likely to make my partner uncomfortable? But actual cheating would be, I guess, kissing someone who's not your partner.
I think in virtually everyone's, at least as far as the UK goes, that's cheating. Obviously, sleeping with somebody else is cheating. But then it's interesting because in this day and age, you get into other forms of cheating, like on a sort of smaller scale. So like if you're sending flirty messages a lot with someone, say, for example, someone you work with, where's the line there in terms of cheating? There's also so-called emotional cheating, where you're not doing anything romantic with someone, but you have this really strong emotional bond with somebody else. But then some people might just call that friendship. Obviously, like all couples have to figure it out between themselves. What counts as not allowed for one couple is very
Mm.
different to another. Do you feel like you'd want to hide it from them? If you feel like you want to hide it from them, then yeah, you're clearly
Yeah,
doing something
but I think
wrong.
people justify it because they're like, oh no, it's just a friendship. I think he sees it as a friendship, so maybe it's just a friendship and I'm just overthinking it. And I shouldn't restrict myself. I should allow myself to have friends with people of the opposite sex. I shouldn't just not speak to them because I'm afraid that it's going to be weird. But I don't know, it can be very grey territory.
Yeah. It's clearly just people trying to justify it. And that's when you get into all these like sort of very legalistic definitions of like, oh yeah, but it's not cheating if you only say it exactly like this. I don't know. It's just people. Yeah, it's people just
Yeah, but I guess
lying
then there's a
to
bit of
themselves.
it's like a philosophical question, like, should you shut down those emotions? Or like if there's something in you that's like called to be with someone else, should you follow that? I think like we're in a weird time where like we really value freedom. So to what end? Like, should you use your marriage as like a prison
Yeah.
to stop you exploring other feelings, or I don't know.
Yeah. I think true. If you really feel like you are losing interest in your partner or whatever, and you feel like it's not going to work out, then yeah, I think there's fair ways of bringing that to an end, though, rather than going behind
Yeah.
somebody's back and breaking all of the rules
Yeah.
that you both agreed to. It's just very, very, it's easier said than done to do that, of course. It's really hard to walk away from things sometimes. It's really hard to admit that things haven't worked out. And it's really hard because you get worried about hurting their feelings. Or sometimes you want the best of both worlds, so you end
Yeah.
up kind of like lying to everybody. Your own emotions get in the way, obviously. So
Yeah.
it's,
And I guess it's just people
yeah.
often are sort of addicted to feeling good. So it's like, oh, I think this feeling is coming from that other person.
Yes.
So like that feels good. I should pursue that. But then you end up maybe in a relationship with that new person
Yeah.
and you're going to feel exactly the same, slightly bored or whatever in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So it's like how to manage those emotions.
100%.
Tricky.
The grass is always
Yes.
greener, as we say. That's definitely part of it. Just not coming to terms with the fact that you're not going to feel amazing all the time in a relationship. I'm worried we haven't given a very good picture of what it's like to date in the UK. We've just sort of it's been extremely negative.
Well, the first question is 如何交外国女友? How do you get a foreign girlfriend? I am hesitant to address this because I just find it a strange. Because what I think is the question should be, how do you get a girlfriend? If they happen to be foreign or not, then, whatever.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be a foreign girlfriend?
I agree. Yeah, don't think of it that way. Find someone who you like and who you have stuff in common with, maybe, and who is a good vibe with. Don't worry about where they come from. That's not gonna doing it that way round. It must be someone from this country or that country.
Unnecessary
That's just not gonna work.
limitation.
It's not
Keep
gonna
your
make you
dating
happy.
pool as wide as possible and allow nice people in from all
Yes,
areas of the world.
100%.
Okay.
Perfect.
怎么知道英国人是认真喜欢你还是只是想玩玩? How can you tell if a British person truly likes you or is just looking for something casual? Good question. That is very difficult because I think we do like to play
that's
games here and we
very
like to play hard to
tricky.
get. Often people will pretend to be cool because they don't want to seem too keen. There's something terrible about being too keen.
Yes, that's true. Definitely. Almost you're afraid of putting the other person off by being too keen. It's too much too soon. And yes, people do like to play hard to get because it makes them feel a bit more valued, I guess. How do you tell it if they really like you or if they just want something casual? That's a massive problem because people will just say anything, almost anything to
That's
kind
awful.
of get what they want
That should
sometimes.
be illegal. If we had a matriarchy, that would be a crime. Honestly, these people would be locked up. You can't say you love someone and then sleep with them and then ignore them after that. That is like morally flawed.
Well, they call it love bombing, don't they? The idea that you just shower someone with kind words and affection in order to get what you want, and then once you've got what you want, you pull back. But how do you tell? I think could part of it be you just don't give the other, if the other person is like quite keen, say, to sleep with you or something, and you don't want to do that, you sort of say no. The other person can wait, and if you really like me, then you'll be willing to wait and cater to what I want. It's not all about what you want, sort of thing. Being very strong about your expectations and what you want from the relationship, and then if you're not getting that, you move on. because if the other person's willing to agree to that, there's a higher
Yeah.
chance that they are genuinely
Yeah.
in this for the long run.
It's like
So maybe that would
negotiating or
help.
bargaining, isn't it? But I feel like
Sadly, yes.
yeah, you have to come at it from what you want rather than do they like me? Do they like me? It's like, do I want someone who keeps not replying for ages? Do I want someone who makes me feel insecure? No, I probably want to feel good in a relationship. So if this person's not making me feel good, that's the wrong person. And then it's simple.
Yeah, that's true, actually. That's quite a good way of looking at it.
This is kind of ties into the next thing. 对方不主动联系就是不喜欢嘛. Yeah, so if they don't take the initiative, does that mean they're not interested? Who knows? I guess the question is, do you want to spend the time on that person if you're consistently not sure? And maybe you can ask them directly. Say, I'm getting weird signals. I'm not sure if you're interested. And if they can't give you a straight answer and sort of stick to their word, then maybe they're not worth your time.
That's a very good point. I think just big, open, honest conversations can resolve 90% of these problems. But if they don't take the initiative, I mean, obviously as well, we have to take into account some people can be quite shy. Some people can be worried about taking the initiative. It's not in their nature to do that. So it doesn't always mean that they're not interested. It could just be that they're naturally a bit restricted as part of their personality. So I wouldn't sort of say it always means that they're not interested. But yeah, as you say, a big open conversation, just being super clear about what you want.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to sort of guess. I mean, there's basically no rules. You can't say, oh, if someone does this, it means this. You just have no idea until you get to know that person or ask them. And the next one is, 你觉得西方人和东方人的恋爱价值观有很大分别吗? Is there a big difference between Western and Eastern views on relationships? Probably. I mean, again, we don't want to generalize too much, but it seems to be more traditional in the East. Like, you wouldn't sort of sleep with someone for ages, maybe, before being in a relationship. It seems less common.
As far as I'm aware, it just seems to be taken more seriously in the East than the West. So that's why I'm just saying, to the listeners, just be on your guard if you're kind of dating in the West, because people are much more comfortable with these gray areas of relationships and a lack of commitment. I think that seems to be one of the general differences.
Very tricky to not let yourself get too attached before you know that there's the commitment that you need. 剩女这个词有英文吗? Do you know about the concept of leftover women in China, Rick?
I do. Sounds like quite a sad phenomenon.
I actually think this is a conspiracy.
Okay. How so?
Why is it that it's the women that are like, oh no, on the shelf? What about the men? There's actually way more single men in China than women.
There are leftover men. I think is there not another phrase for
there
this?
There is, but it's sort of, the emphasis is more on 剩女. That's like the phenomenon kind of thing.
Okay. Right. Okay. Is there the same thing in the UK? Yes, there's a term which I think is quite frowned upon these days, which is spinster.
That's quite different though. That's like really much older. That's like a 60, 70-year-old woman who's been single forever, right?
Right, yeah. Well, I think it could be a little bit younger than that. But yeah, just someone who kind of never manages to marry, never sort of gets there in the end, and then just kind of grows old alone, which is quite sad. But yeah, it's kind of an older term.
But again, see, why is there not the equivalent for the man?
Really...
How do you describe a man who's old and single? He's a bachelor, which is a positive word. That actually has positive connotations. There's such a conspiracy.
True, it doesn't... Yeah, like your bachelor pad, like where you live and stuff. It doesn't have the same... It's true, it doesn't have the same sense of negativity. That is true. Yeah, so is there an exact equivalent for leftover woman? Not an exact
Not for over the age of 30.
No, not an exact one.
No, I think people just, most people hope that others can be happy. I wouldn't say there's a lot of judgment about being single into old age in the UK. Like, it's fairly common.
Yeah, not as much anymore. I think in previous generations, yes. But nowadays, I think people are more relaxed about it. People lose, unfortunately, they lose spouses or there are divorces. I think people are just much more used to the idea that, like, there are these disruptions in life and, it's difficult for everyone. We're a little bit nicer to each other on that front.
I mean, having said that, there's definitely still the anxiety, I know there was for me, of approaching 30. I think approaching 30 and being single, maybe especially as a woman, feels very anxiety provoking there's all this cultural stuff like from films and everything. It's like you want to have the perfect like white wedding and then have children and whatever. And I guess maybe there is a bit more of the ticking clock if you do want a family. So I think people can still get very anxious about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. It is a little bit lopsided in that way.
Although apparently also that's maybe not true as well, because men's sperm quality also declines and like their DNA fragments. So like this idea that they're just fertile into like their 50s is also very much not true.
Yeah, it's not quite like that. And obviously, yeah, like even as a man, you don't have all the time in the world. It will get more difficult. I knew people back when I lived in London who were kind of mid-30s and single, and they all told me like, yeah, it does get harder. It's not like it's just perpetually easy. So yeah, for
I
sure.
would say as well, that's probably something to be aware of if you're a woman and you're dating men. Like if you're finding that there's a lot of commitment issues for the men under 30, I would say that should be expected, because a lot of the time men don't even have the concept of settling until they've at least passed 30, maybe even 35, sometimes 40. They're not even sure if they want to settle down or not. Don't date younger if you really want to settle down and have a family.
Yeah, probably not a good idea.
Yeah, obviously not for
speaking,
everyone.
Yes,
yeah, we
I would
shouldn't
agree with that.
stereotype everyone, but yeah. And the last one is 英国人会不会觉得如果跟亚洲人交往，未来让他们放弃待在英国会不行? Okay, I guess this is not specific to Asia, but like if you're dating someone from another country, would you find it sort of too difficult if that meant that in the future you had to not live in the UK? I would say that's totally personal. Really depends on how attached to the UK someone is.
Yeah, that just varies a lot. I know some people who've moved for their partners. I know some people whose partners have moved for them. Some people I know would struggle massively with leaving the UK. Some people I know would struggle massively with leaving like their neighborhood where they grew up, let alone leaving the country. Some people love the idea of living abroad and they end up staying there kind of forever. And I don't know, it really varies from person to person. I wouldn't say there's a rule with that.
Yeah, it really depends.
Yeah, among British
some people
people
would love the idea of,
wow,
I might get to move to a different country. Sounds exciting.
I guess the only drawback is, British people aren't brilliant with languages. So I think that would play a part in maybe worrying us about moving to another country, because we are I think we're a lot more anxious about learning languages than in other countries.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was anxious, but my perception was like more lazy or like less adventurous or something.
Yeah, for sure. I think all those things. Just because we're solidly monolingual, and a lot of other countries, you at least have maybe two languages, sometimes three, sometimes four, kind of all in the mix. So it's not really as intimidating for them. But for us, the idea of like starting from scratch and learning a foreign language can be quite daunting. And also, just a lot of British people just don't want to do that. So that'd be maybe a consideration.
So I think that's all we've got time for today. Thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully we can come back to this topic as there's a lot more to say about it, I'm sure. I'm Susie.
I'm Rick.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
在教英文这么多年中，我发现无论学生们的程度如何，就算听说读写都很不错，但当他们真正踏上英国的土地时，还是会觉得少了点什么。好比说，在旅游时总觉得在走马看花，有看但没有懂；在英国读书、工作或社交时，与当地人总有种说不出的距离感，常常只能在旁边微笑或点头，找不到插话的机会。又或者，如果喜欢看英国的电影或影集，却无法理解英式幽默，搞不懂笑点在哪。毕竟英国文化不仅是红茶和皇室，语言也不只是单字和文法，从英国人的风俗习惯、交流方式到文学、电影、足球等，这些文化背景塑造了英国人的语言风格与社交习惯，影响着每一次对话和互动。这将是为什么我们将4月推出全方位了解英国文化课程。身为英国人的我，精心挑选了最适合英文学习者的实用内容，帮助你了解哪些英文母语者习以为常但课本上都不会教的文化细节。每周只需要你一点点的时间，专注在一个文化主题，就能循序渐进了解52个实用的英国文化，让你仿佛换上一颗英国人的脑袋，自然的 地理解英国人日常对话背后的文化逻辑。我们效仿与牛津大学同款的1年3学期制，系统化你的学习，并提供2种学习方式，让你根据自己的需求与生活节奏做选择。如果你希望自主安排学习时间，可以选择影片自学，每支影片都能无限次播放，确保你能够自由规划与复习。加入如牛津大学 Tutorials 班的小班课程，除了影片之外，还可以与英国当地教师一起讨论交流，确保你能够灵活运用，提升语感，让你英语沟通更加自然流畅。毕竟语言和文化需要你亲身感受、模拟练习，才能真正内化与体会。无论是计划到英国旅游，希望更深入体验当地文化，还是即将留学工作，想要更快适应环境，或是单纯对英国文化充满热情，这门课都能带给你全新的体验，让你的英文学习不再只是记忆单词和语法，而是真正理解文化，让每一场对话、每一次互动都更自然、更有深度。想要让英国文化不只是知识，而是成为你生活的一部分吗？那你可能要快，因为 Michaelmas 学期将在3月31日截止报名，错过这次机会就得再等4个月才能加入下一学期的课程。点击 susiewu.com/culture 马上报名课程，并取得更多课程资讯，期待与你一同踏上这趟精彩的英国文化之旅。